Today I want to talk to you about the 6 things that I wish I knew before I started using interactive brokers. Because when I started my investing journey, everybody told me you should try interactive brokers. And well, by now I have, and I'm using it actively. But if I knew back then what I know now, not sure if I would have started with interactive brokers actually, because yeah, these are definitely things to keep in mind. So I'll speak about the 6, and then of course towards the end of the video also share with you why I still think it's one of the best brokers that you could possibly be using. Right, so first off, it is very overwhelming and has a steep learning curve to it, I would say, because the interface is just not as intuitive as it is for other stockbrokers. Here we are inside the web application. There's so many different applications that you can actually choose, or portals as they call them. You can see over here so many different ones. You have the IBKR desktop app even, Traders Workstation for frequent traders. You have the IBKR mobile app. You have a global trader app, actually 3 apps, and impact app, yet another one. Here we are inside the client portal. So that's the one I'm using right now. There are also APIs and the forecast trader. So a lot of options to choose from. And that alone often overwhelms users because they ask me, Kai, which one should I even start? The good thing is you can try all of them free of charge with the same login. So once you have one account, you can basically use any of them. But usually I stick to the global trader app, or of course the web interface, which is the client portal over here. So here we are inside my account. And yeah, if you're starting from scratch, honestly, I think it's so much more overwhelming than many of the other fintech apps that you have these days that make it much more seamless and easier to navigate, especially for beginning investors. But of course, it's very, very powerful, which, is one of the advantages we'll speak about later on. But yeah, in the beginning, it can really be overwhelming. Just look at some of the reports over here. When you pull up, for example, the portfolio analyst report, which is a popular report, just look at it. It is rather complex, right? And I must say, they already improved it quite a lot from when I started using it. But even then, it is rather complicated and overwhelming, which is great if you want to have this information. But if you're just starting off, it can be a little bit too overwhelming. So some say it feels like navigating an airplane. Of course, after a while, once you get a hang of it, you know where things are located, but you just have so many options. Look at all these things you can look for. That's a particular stock research function they have in here. But yeah, it's just a lot to deal with. The second point has to do with dividend tracking. Now, if you love dividends, which, who doesn't like dividends, right? To receive them, passive income in a way, it is not as straightforward as I wish it was with other brokers, even though none of the brokers are doing a perfect job, I would say, with dividend tracking. But in that regard, interactive brokers could definitely really improve going forward. Usually when you receive a dividend, it would show over here for a while in the dividend column, then it would go cash, and then you could reinvest it if you wanted to, or if you enable drip, if you have it available, it will be automatically reinvested if you have set it up, which you can do over here inside the settings, dividend election, and then basically say, receive cash. That's what I have selected, but you could change that to drip, basically reinvest the dividend automatically, and it will be reinvested on your behalf. But still, even just tracking where the money goes, it is not that easy. If I go into my portfolio right now, I only have one holding over here, the S&P 500 ETF of my choice, SPY5. So you would see some information over here, and then you scroll down, you see kind of the most recent transactions, right? So I see my dividends over here, but it would have been just nice to have one column over here to see total dividends paid to me over the lifetime of holding a stock or ETF, right? It would just be so much easier rather than having to, jump around and find it somehow. That's just such a small UI tweak that they could have done to have it in there easily shown to you. Now, of course, you can find this information, for example, once again, if you go performance and reports, you could find it here in portfolio analyst. So it's hidden in many different places. They have added this recently called projected income. So here you can see estimated annual income from my holdings right now. Right now, this year, I'll be earning $580. You can see how that's projected to grow. So that's nice. You can also build your own statement over here, like a dividend statement, for example. And I could create that dividend statement for me. It will generate it as a PDF, and I can see all the dividends that I've received year to date. But again, as I said, while it's possible to get the information, why couldn't they just make it easier to access? I think it would appeal to a lot of dividend investors. So for that, I think there are much better options out there. For example, Delta Investment Tracker, which I use personally for my portfolio to track, but especially for dividend investors, I could really recommend you get Quinn. I think they're doing the best job in terms of displaying your dividends, all the different notifications you get with it, dividend forecast, and so forth. So I think for that, get Quinn is really good if you're really deep into dividends. Or if you want a completely free solution, Portfolio Performance, which is probably the most detailed, investment tracker that you can have. It's free of charge. You don't have to pay anything for it. It is, however, also similar to IBKR, interactive brokers, a bit clunky, but here you can really track, manually most of the things that you have to input manually, but then you can really track your portfolio over different brokers, many years. Even you sold something, bought it later, right? It's a bit tricky to track in one broker, right? It doesn't track my total gains. If I sold a stock with a plus and reinvested it, it doesn't really show it usually. So he can really track that. So that's a good option as well if you want something completely free, but really detailed. And they have a good dividend section in there as well. The next point has to do with customer support, which again, also just feels a little bit old school, I must say. So basically what you would do, go over here to that envelope, click on that. That will open another interface and it's loading. It's just, again, not so intuitive. Some other brokers, they have a chatting function right inside the app. Here you have sort of this messaging center and then you see the open tickets that you have. And if you want to create a new message, you have to compose a new ticket and then obviously select from what it is and so on. Of course, they first send you towards the FAQ and you can see it's really quite difficult to get to the contact us page. So you have to select what it is, how I can open an account and so forth. They send you to the FAQ. Then I have to actually ask a question. Let's say you ask a long question. Even if the iBot, which is their AI version, can't answer it, then finally you can say no contact support and then you can create a ticket over here and then write a ticket, choose again from all the different topics that they have, and then eventually you can write a ticket and usually it gets answered within 24 hours up to 48 hours. I found in my experience I didn't have too many issues with them. But yeah, as I said, it's just a little bit clunky. You'll get an answer, definitely, because I've also seen other stockbrokers where you send something, I'm looking at you, Trade Republic, you never hear back from anyone. So I think in that regard, they're really quite responsive when they do get a message, but getting the message out is just a little bit clunky and cumbersome, I would say. The next point has to do with mostly deposits. Withdrawal is pretty straightforward, but depositing money can be also, again, a bit tricky depending on which region you're based in. So first of all, when people come to the page over here, they even ask me, where's the deposit button, right? So again, it could be a bit more intuitive to deposit money. For example, you could do it this way. There are many different ways. You could go into your portfolio or you can have this little, quick access button over here, deposit, you click on that. And then from here, you can choose different deposit methods. Again, you have the options, but it can also be overwhelming. So you can see already some of the options that I have over here. But let's say you want to create a new one. You have to click on use new deposit method. And then from here, it shows up a lot of different options. Once again, so many options, right? Then, of course, you should select which currency you're planning to deposit in, right? If you want to deposit euros, you have different options to deposit that than dollars, for example. So again, depends on where you live. Obviously, then you have different options. If it was, for example, dollars, you could do a bank transfer. You could link a bank account directly to it. Or you can also connect it to your Wise balance account, which is great. If you use Wise a lot, actually, that's quite fast. It also describes you how fast something is, how much are the fees and so forth. So let's say you go with a bank wire, right? You click on get instructions and then sort of you set it up over here, what is the sending institution, how much you want to deposit. And you don't have to do that every time. But I found if you do enter the deposit amount first, it usually goes through faster because they're already expecting that incoming transfer. So make sure you usually do that. But again, it's just a bit clunky, right? In most other stockbrokers, I don't have to tell them that I make a deposit. I just make the deposit and the money is being received over there. And even as it says over here, it should take 1-2 business days. Of course, again, depends on where you live. I know many people living in Europe, it can go quite fast if you do a SEPA transfer, but others, they have been struggling. Now, myself included in the UAE, sometimes it takes a bit longer, but now also my sending bank charges me fees for sending dollars, which I previously didn't have with Revolut back in Europe. So yeah, it's just, again, not that seamless. It's nothing wrong with it. Once you've done it, it's pretty straightforward. And if you do a monthly transfer, you can also set it up. Ideally, I would recommend you to set up a monthly transfer from your bank to interactive brokers if you want to do dollar cost average. But yeah, the first time, it is just a little bit something to get to know and find your way around. The next point has to do with the, I think, a little bit confusing pricing structure. Now, again, hear me out. If I compare it to apps like Trade 212 or Lightyear, it's either zero trading commission or very little or a flat trading commission. So you know exactly you pay €1 or $1, whatever it is, or none. And you kind of have an idea how much commission you face. With interactive brokers, even after many years of using it, honestly, until I'm about to confirm a stock purchase order, I generally have an idea, but I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to be paying, right? So that's just also something to keep in mind. I mean, generally their fees are very, very low. So you're not going to get ripped off. So that's also important to know. So the rates are very competitive, but still it would just be nice to really kind of exactly know how much you'll be paying. Even pricing and see all the different pricing plans over here, commission fees and all these different things. Just at the first glance, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, that's just overwhelming. Again, very, very competitive, very low fees, but just not so straightforward as I had it with other brokers. But that's just something to keep in mind, right? Obviously, it hasn't stopped me from using it because I said the fees are very attractive, but it's just something to keep in mind. If you go into stocks over here, of course, depends on which stock market you're buying. And then here you have all the various fees and expenses for the various stock markets, which is fair enough, right? Because Austrian stock market may have different fees and commissions than the Belgian one. So if you trade on any of those, so it doesn't matter where you're trading from, it matters where you're trading on. Of course, Americas usually tends to be the cheapest, you can see over here, even for a huge volume on the tiered, which is also something I always recommend. Usually it makes sense for most people to go with the tiered pricing plan. So you can even change between tiered and fixed inside the settings. So keep in mind, play around with it. But usually I found, for myself at least, that the tiered is the cheaper one. So here on US stocks, it is actually pretty straightforward. I usually end up paying 35 cents per order, which is great. So it was more difficult if I bought my S&P 500 ETF in dollars in London. There it was always different pricing because they also have things like smart routing, right? Where they try to find the best price for you. So I never exactly knew until I placed the order how much I was about to be charged. They also charge you for currency conversion like pretty much any stockbroker would. But here the price is extremely competitive. You can see 0.2 basis points, as cheap as it gets. There will be a minimum per order. So ideally you want to exchange a larger amount, but then $2 pretty much plus any small basis point over here. Trust me, it's going to be the cheapest way how you can exchange, for example, euros to dollars or dollars to euros, whatever currency you want. They really have such a tiny margin on currency conversion fees. So if you do that a lot, you will really love Interactive Brokers for that. And to make you a little bit more confused, even for the pricing plan, you also choose between IBKR Lite or IBKR Pro, which does once again come with different pricing. But I guess for most of you watching outside the US, usually you don't really have access to IBKR Lite. That's mostly for US. I think they now added Singapore and maybe some other countries, but mostly, yeah, for those. And for the rest of us, myself included, it's IBKR Pro, so you don't have to choose it. Only you can choose here between fixed and tiered pricing. You can change inside the settings, account configuration over here, and then IBKR pricing plan. And as you can see, I have it on tiered, not on fixed, because for me, that turned out to be cheaper. And lastly, the fact that there are too many features that you probably won't be using ever, right? I mean, myself included, so many of them I never even use. So it's nice to have them, but again, they might be a little bit redundant if you're not really going so deep into it. Apart from some of the apps I mentioned to you that I'm never going to use. Here inside the settings, for example, you have trading permissions. So you can see all the things that you could be trading, right? So right now, for me, I actually disabled most of them. I only have stocks and currency forex enabled, but you could be trading all these different things: index futures, future options, single stock futures, CFDs, options, warrants, bonds, mutual funds, metals. I really recommend not to have them enabled because also you have to set it up correctly the first time. So if I go into stocks, for example, you have to really tell it what and where you want to be trading, because a lot of people, they try to buy stocks in a certain country and they couldn't. Then they asked me, so I cannot buy a stock over there because I don't have the trading permission, because they didn't go into the trading permissions over here to set up correctly. You can take, for example, all of Europe. So then when you look for a specific stock in that country on the stock market, you would see it over here and search. If, for example, right now, for whatever reason, I didn't have Denmark enabled, I wouldn't be able to find a Danish company listed on the Danish stock exchange over here because I don't have it enabled. I would have to enable it and then save it, and then I could go. The same with fractional shares. A lot of people were wondering why they can't buy fractional shares. So you want to make sure you enable all global and global trade in fractions. So that's enabled, and that will give you the ability to trade fractional shares. So I think by now you really get the point. It definitely has a steep learning curve if I compare it to some other stockbrokers, as I mentioned, like Lightyear, which for me is the cleanest and sleekest app out there, or even Trading 212, eToro, so many different ones. So by now you might be wondering, but Kai, after all you told me about Interactive Brokers, why should I even be using it still? Or why are you using it in the first place? Well, not all is doom and gloom. While there are certainly points to be improved, which are mostly interface related, fundamentally I would say the core engine of the stockbroker, of Interactive Brokers, is, I think, one of the strongest one and most trustworthy in the world. They've been around the longest. They are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, stockbroker in the world. And they've just been around for so long. They know what they're doing. So if I had to choose one broker only where I would keep my money safe, it would have to be Interactive Brokers. Because ultimately, yes, it's great to have a nice app and zero commission trading and all these bells and whistles is nice. But ultimately, we invest to keep our funds safe, right? So I'm not saying the other ones aren't safe. I would definitely sleep the most peaceful with my money on Interactive Brokers because I know they will deliver and they will keep my funds safe no matter what. So that's probably the biggest appeal. I can really recommend anyone who's serious about building a long-term wealth portfolio. If you just want to get into the game and play around a little bit to get a feel for investing, whether you like it or not, I think there are some, other alternatives, even things like Revolut, right? I started off with Revolut. Is it the best app to really grow a major portfolio long-term? I'm talking about 6 figures, 7 figures and beyond. Probably not. Again, I would then gravitate back towards interactive brokers, but to get your feet wet and learn around, I think there's some other great options. I made a lot of videos about them, but yes, their unmatched trust and safety really makes it number one choice in that regard. The fees, as I mentioned to you, while they are a little bit confusing, they are extremely low, really, really competitive. Also things like spreads, right? Because some brokers, they charge you zero commission, but they have a very high spread, meaning the difference between the buy and the ask price. Because if they show you one price, that you will buy it at, you say, oh, that's a good price. When in reality, the price for the same stock or ETF is actually lower. So they basically bake in that cushion for themselves, which is called the spread. So you don't pay any commission on it, but the commission is basically in a higher price that you pay. So let's say a stock costs 100 euros. In the real market terms, they might charge you 101 euros for it. And you think, well, okay, I'm going to buy it at 101 euros because obviously you may not check the market data, right? So already they're charging you a 1 euro commission basically without calling a commission. That's just what we call the spread. So here with interactive brokers, you know you're going to get very tight spread. So it will be pretty much as close as possible to the real market price. And as I said, also for currency conversion, while it's a bit clunky, it is probably the cheapest possible way, especially for larger amounts. I would 100% recommend interactive brokers for that. And the cool thing is you have global reach, because if you want to invest in Denmark or Belgium or any other stock exchange, most likely you will find them on interactive brokers. While some other, for example, European apps or brokers from different countries, they're usually very strong regionally, but on a global scale, they may not be that diversified. And I also gotta give credit to interactive brokers. When I started making videos about them a couple of years ago, it was even worse. The interface was super clunky, and they've come a long way. Now that you have different apps available like Global Trader, which is much more appealing, I would say. Still not quite there, but it's definitely getting better. The web interface also better, as I've shown to you before. Things like projected income and certain things are definitely cleaned up, and they're on the right way. So I like that they keep on innovating and bringing new features. So they have it. Despite all the 6 points that I mentioned in today's video, I'm still a huge fan and user of interactive brokers. If you want to check them out for yourself, use my link down in the description below. And if you still have any questions about any of the things I spoke to you about today, pop them in the comments down below. Happy to hear from you. Next up, check out this video over here. As always, thanks a lot for watching. Stay healthy, get wealthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.